What happens when a disgraced sheriff meets the daughter of the man he failed to save? When Rose Dalton started building her cabin in the Montana wilderness, she thought she was hiding from her past. But when Ethan Cross rode down that hill, he brought with him the one secret that could destroy them both, or finally set them free. This is a story about justice, redemption, and love, born from the ashes of tragedy. If you believe in second chances, hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Now let's begin. I Know Who Killed Your Father. When sheriff's guilt met doctor's revenge, love bloomed. The woman dragged the pine log uphill alone. Ethan Cross watched from his horse on the ridge, late October wind cutting through his coat. The log was full-length, heavy enough that two men would curse hauling it. She had rope over her shoulder boots, digging into rocky soil, her faded calico dress mud-stained to the knees. Most women would have quit an hour ago. He nudged his horse down the slope. The half-built cabin came into view, walls barely chest-high, no roof, surrounded by scattered tools and cut timber. A canvas tent sagged beside it, smoke rising from a meager fire pit. She heard his approach and straightened, breathing hard. Didn't run, didn't call for help. Just stood there, chin up, watching him come. "Afternoon," Ethan said, dismounting. "That's a lot of cabin for one person. Don't need charity from strangers." Her voice was steady, but her hands stayed on the rope like she might need to use it as a weapon. He studied the walls. "Roof won't hold without proper bracing. Storms coming in 2 weeks, maybe less. I'll manage." Ethan looked at her, then really looked. A scar ran from her left temple to her jawline, old and pale against weathered skin. But it was her eyes that caught him, intelligent, wary, familiar, in a way that made his chest tighten. "Burns," he guessed. She read his gaze and her shoulders tensed. "I'm not pretty," she said, defensive, like she'd said it 100 times before. Ethan met her eyes. "That's fine. I need honest, not fancy. Winter kills pretty folks first out here." She blinked. Something shifted in her face. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion of kindness. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because I'm tired of liars in nice dresses." He picked up her hammer, tested its weight. The handle was wrapped in cloth strips for a smaller grip. "You got nails?" She hesitated, then nodded toward a crate. "I can pay with labor. I cook, I mend." "Fair enough." He walked to the nearest wall, examined the joints. "What's your name?" "Rose Dalton." "Ethan Cross. I run cattle 3 miles south." He glanced at the sky clouds, thickening, light fading. "We start tomorrow at first light." Rose watched him ride away until he disappeared into the pines. Then she sat down hard on a stump, hands shaking. First snow in 2 weeks, first hope in 6 months. She wasn't sure which scared her more. The next afternoon, Ethan crouched by Rose's fire, examining her tools while she boiled coffee in a dented pot. The hammer handle, the sorted nails, the careful stacks of lumber, everything spoke of someone who planned, who thought ahead. "You do good work," he said. "Taught myself." She handed him a tin cup. "After my husband died." He sipped the coffee, strong and bitter, cowboy style. "Town's got a lot of widows. Why buy land out here alone?" Rose's jaw tightened. "Merchant in town wanted me after William passed. Said I needed a man's protection. When I refused..." She stared into the fire. Rumors started. Cursed woman, witch who burned her own house down. Ethan said nothing, waiting. "Fire started during a fight," she continued, voice flat. "Lamp broke. I tried to pull him out. He hit me into the flames. I got free. He didn't." She touched her scar unconsciously. "Town buried him a hero. Buried me alive with gossip. So you bought this claim." "With everything I had left. Figured if I'm going to be alone, might as well be on my own terms." She looked at him directly. "What about you? Ranch that size, you should have a wife, sons even." Ethan set down his cup. "Had a wife, Margaret. Beautiful woman, everyone loved her. She wanted town life, parties, dances, people admiring her dress." He paused. "She died 2 years back. Childbirth. Baby didn't make it either. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I loved her, but I didn't like her much toward the end. She didn't like me either, truth be told." He stood, brushed off his pants. "Town widows circle me now like buzzards. All performance, no help. I'm drowning in women who want to be Mrs. Cross but don't want to be my partner." Rose stood too, studying him with new understanding. So this arrangement is practical. You need help before winter, Ethan finished. I need meals and mending. Nobody needs to make it more complicated. Agreed. They shook hands. Her grip matched his calloused, firm, honest. He noticed she didn't look away. We'll start on the roof frame tomorrow, he said as he mounted up. Rose watched until the trees swallowed him. Then she turned back to her half-built cabin, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope was dangerous, but maybe this once it was worth the risk. 1 week later, snow began to fall. Rose measured a board while Ethan sawed, their breath fogging in the cold November air. The cabin walls were complete, now the roof frame half finished. They worked in efficient silence, a rhythm developed through days of shared labor. Hold this steady, Ethan said, lifting a beam. She braced it while he hammered. Snow dusted their shoulders, melting against their necks. William used to drink, Rose said suddenly. Started after we lost our first baby. Got mean when he drank. Ethan kept hammering but listened. That night he came home drunk. Started yelling about supper being cold, about me being useless. Knocked the lamp over during the fight. She stared at the beam she was holding. I tried to save him, even after everything I tried, but the fire. She shook her head. Town decided I must have wanted him dead. Easier to blame the scarred woman than admit their church deacon beat his wife. Ethan set down the hammer. My wife wanted everything I couldn't give her. Status, excitement. I knew she was unhappy, but I kept hoping the ranch would be enough. He looked at the mountains. When she died, my first thought was, I'm free. Been hating myself for that ever since. Maybe God gives us what we can't keep so we learn what we actually need, Rose said quietly. Maybe. Ethan picked up his hammer again. Or maybe God's just quieter than preachers claim. The snow intensified suddenly, thick flakes, wind picking up. Ethan squinted at the sky. We need to stop. This is turning into a blizzard. You should go before it gets worse. Too late for that. He secured the tarp over the unfinished roof. I'm staying the night. Rose's face went carefully blank. There's only one blanket. We'll manage. By nightfall, the storm howled outside. They sat by the fire inside the half-finished cabin canvas tarp overhead, sharing Rose's blanket around their shoulders. Not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. Rose pulled a book from her pack, water-stained but intact. Do you read? Barely, Ethan admitted. Never had much schooling. I could teach you if you want. I'd like that. She opened to a marked page and began reading aloud Homer's Odyssey, Penelope waiting for Odysseus. Her voice was soft but clear, turning ancient words into something alive. Ethan listened like a man starving. Somewhere around midnight, exhausted, Rose's head drooped against his shoulder. He went very still, afraid to wake her, afraid to move. At dawn, she stirred and realized where she was. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Neither pulled away. Then Ethan looked through the doorway, just a frame, no door yet, and his face hardened. What? Rose asked. Horse tracks in the snow, fresh ones. Someone circled the cabin during the storm. They stood together in the doorway. In the distance, riders approached, 3 men led by a figure Rose recognized with dread. Harrison Webb was coming to call. 2 weeks later, the cabin was nearly complete. Door-hung windows sealed chimney, drawing smoke properly. Rose plastered the gaps between logs while Ethan fitted shutters outside. She heard him humming the first music this silent place had known. They'd found a rhythm. She anticipated his needs. He read her exhaustion without asking. Conversations deepened beyond survival. You mentioned reading, Ethan said during their noon break. What else you got? Rose produced 3 more books from her trunk, Shakespeare, Whitman, and something that made Ethan's blood run cold. A medical textbook worn from use with Dr. Jonathan Dalton inscribed inside the cover. His cup slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. Rose. His voice was strange, tight. Your father's name, what was it? She went very still. White boyo, just please. Jonathan Dalton, he was a doctor in Denver. He died when I was 16. Her eyes searched his face. Ethan, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. In a way, he had. He'd been haunting one for 8 years. A messenger arrived that afternoon with supplies from town. The boy wouldn't meet Rose's eyes, just dropped the crates and left. A note was pinned to the flour sack. Ethan opened it, face darkening. Offer still stands. Honest work for honest woman. Leave this arrangement. H. Webb. Webb's the merchant, Rose said quietly. The one who wanted me. Ethan crumpled the note. I'm writing to town. No, Rose caught his arm. Let them talk. These walls don't care about gossip. But Ethan was staring at her with something like recognition. Something like grief. Rose, he said slowly, 8 years ago I was sheriff in Denver. Your father, I knew your father. The world tilted. Rose's hand fell away from his arm. That's impossible. Dr. Jonathan Dalton, found dead in his clinic November 1878. Robbery gone wrong, they said, but nothing was missing. No witnesses. Ethan's voice was hollow. I worked that case for months. Never found the killer. Rose stumbled backward. You were the sheriff who gave up, who let them close the case. I didn't give up. Payne cracked his voice. I had suspects, but no proof. The city wanted it buried, said it was bad for business. I was ordered to drop it or lose my badge. So you chose your job over justice. I chose to keep digging in secret. Kept files, kept investigating on my own time. He reached for her, but she stepped away. Rose, I never stopped looking. But you never found him. Tears ran down her cheeks. My father died, and you let his killer walk free. I'm sorry. The words broke out of him. God, Rose, I'm so sorry. If I'd known who you were, what you'd have told me sooner, warned me you were the man who failed my family. She laughed bitterly. All this time, you've been lying to me. I wasn't lying. I didn't know. You knew the moment you saw that book. I could see it in your face. She turned away. Get out. Rose. Get out. Well, get out. I can't look at you right now. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, then gathered his hat and coat. At the door, he stopped. The case file, he said quietly. I still have it. Every interview, every lead, including the one suspect I could never prove guilty. Rose didn't turn around. Who, Harrison Webb. Rose sat alone in her completed cabin as December wind howled outside. 3 days had passed since Ethan's revelation, 3 days of working through shock and betrayal, and something worse, the growing certainty that pieces of her past were clicking into place. Harrison Webb. She remembered him from Denver, a businessman with interests in mining and real estate. He'd visited her father's clinic several times, always with complaints that seemed minor, always asking questions about other patients, about her father's work, with the poor immigrants who couldn't pay, always watching her with eyes that made her skin crawl. She pulled the medical textbook from its hiding place and opened it to her father's notes. Page after page of careful documentation. Not just treatments, but observations. Concerned about mining safety. Suspicions about worker poisoning. Questions about who was profiting from covering up industrial accidents. Her father hadn't just been a doctor. He'd been gathering evidence. A knock at the door made her jump. Not Ethan's firm rap, but something softer, more hesitant. She opened it to find a young woman holding a bundle, snow-dusting her dark hair. Miss Dalton, I'm Mary Chen. I work at the boarding house in town. Rose recognized her, one of the Chinese families who'd settled near Elkridge after the railroad work ended. Is something wrong? My daughter Lynn, she's very sick. Fever, cough, that won't stop. Dr. Porter in town, Mary's voice broke. He won't see her. Says he doesn't treat her kind. Rose's heart clenched. Bring her in. Mary carried in a small girl, maybe 5 years old, burning with fever. Rose's training kicked in immediately. She felt for a pulse, listened to breathing, examined the child's throat. Pneumonia, she diagnosed. But early stages, treatable if we act quickly. She moved to her medical supplies, herbs, and medicines. She'd hidden away tools of a trade she'd been forced to abandon. Mary watched in amazement as Rose prepared a tincture. You really are a doctor. I was. My father trained me, taught me everything he knew. Rose administered the medicine carefully. But women aren't supposed to practice medicine, especially not women with reputations. My husband, he was there the night your clinic burned in Denver. He saw you trying to save people even with the building falling down. Mary touched Rose's scarred hand. He said you were the bravest person he had ever seen. Rose's throat tightened. Your husband was Dr. Porter's patient. No, we lived in the district near your father's clinic. Dr. Dalton was the only doctor who would treat Chinese workers. When he died, Mary's eyes filled. We had nowhere to go. That's why we came here hoping for a new start. Pieces clicked together. Mary, the night my father died. Oh, about to die. Do you remember anything unusual? Anyone hanging around the clinic? Mary thought carefully. There was a white man in a fancy coat. He argued with Dr. Dalton earlier that day, loud voices. Your father seemed upset after. Can you describe him? Tall, well-dressed, beard but neat. He had a gold watch chain. Mary paused. And he smelled like expensive cigars that only rich men smoke. Harrison Webb. Rose was certain now. Mary, I need you to keep Lynn here tonight. Let me monitor her fever, but don't tell anyone where you are, understand? Mary nodded, clutching her daughter. As night fell, Rose tended the sick child and thought about patterns. Her father had treated the poor, the immigrants, the forgotten people of Denver. He'd asked inconvenient questions about mining accidents and worker safety, and then he died just as he was preparing to testify before a territorial commission about industrial poisoning. Harrison Webb had been involved in mining then. He was involved in commerce now, and he'd followed her to Montana claiming interest in her welfare, but really what? What did he want around midnight? Lynn's fever broke. The child slept peacefully for the first time in days, and Mary wept with relief. How can I thank you, she whispered. By being careful, Rose said. And by telling me, has Harrison Webb ever visited the Chinese Quarter in town? Asked questions about your family? Mary's face went pale. Yes, last month. He wanted to know about work permits, about who was documented and who wasn't. He offered jobs at his lumber mill, but she shuddered. The way he looked at the girls. We told our daughters to stay inside when he comes around. Another pattern. Vulnerable people, isolated communities, someone in power asking the wrong questions for the wrong reasons. Rose made a decision. Tomorrow she would swallow her pride and find Ethan Cross. Because whatever Harrison Webb was hiding, it was bigger than her father's murder. And she was going to need help to stop him. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Rose saddled the horse Ethan had left for her use and rode toward his ranch. Lynn and Mary safely returned to town with medicine and instructions. She found him in his barn, repairing tack with the focused intensity of a man avoiding his thoughts. He looked up when she entered, hope and wariness warring in his expression. Rose, I need to see the case file, she said without preamble. All of it. He nodded, setting down his tools. It's in the house. They walked in tense silence to his kitchen, where he pulled a wooden box from a hidden compartment behind the pantry. Inside were dozens of documents, photographs, interview notes, 8 years of investigation. Rose spread them on the table, her medical training helping her organize the evidence methodically. Financial records showing Webb's mining investments. Witness statements about arguments between Webb and her father. A photograph of the crime scene that made her stomach clench. Here, Ethan said quietly, pointing to a particular document. Webb's alibi for the night your father died. He claimed to be at a business dinner with 3 other men. Rose studied the names. These witnesses, what happened to them? One moved to California and won't return correspondence. One died in a mining accident 6 months after your father's death. The third, Ethan's jaw tightened, recanted his statement a year later. Said he'd been mistaken about the date. Someone got to them. That was my conclusion. But by then, Webb had been elected to the territorial legislature. Untouchable. Rose found another document, a letter in her father's handwriting. Ethan, look at this. The letter was addressed to the Territorial Health Commission detailing systematic poisoning of mine workers through contaminated water supplies. It named specific companies, specific officials who'd covered up industrial accidents. And at the top of the list of responsible parties was Harrison Webb. Your father was going to testify, Ethan said. He had evidence that would have destroyed Webb's business empire and probably sent him to prison. So Webb killed him? Rose's voice was steady, but her hands shook. And when I survived the clinic fire when I came to Montana, he followed you to finish what he started or to make sure you never remembered anything dangerous. A sound outside made them both freeze. Horses approaching at a gallop. Ethan moved to the window, swore softly. Webb and 4 men, armed. Rose's heart hammered. How did he know I was here? Someone's been watching us all along. Ethan reached for his gun belt. Rose, there's a root cellar behind the house. Get down there and stay quiet no matter what you hear. I won't hide while you This isn't about courage. He gripped her shoulders. If Webb kills us both, who's going to stop him? Who's going to protect the people he's still hurting? She wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. With a frustrated sound, she gathered the most important documents and headed for the cellar. From below, she heard boots on the porch, voices raised in false civility. "Cross, we need to talk." Ethan's voice carefully controlled. "About what, Webb?" "About the woman you're harboring. Rose Dalton. He has stolen property belonging to me. A medical bag with certain documents. I'm here to retrieve them." "Don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play stupid sheriff." "Oh, that's right. You're not sheriff anymore, are you? Threw away your badge rather than do your job properly." Rose pressed her hand to her mouth to muffle a gasp. Ethan had resigned. He'd given up his career to keep investigating her father's murder. "Get off my land, Webb." "Not without what I came for." Boys searched the house. Heavy footsteps, the sound of furniture being overturned. Rose clutched the documents tighter, understanding now why her father had hidden copies of everything, why he trained her not just in medicine, but in recognizing patterns of corruption. He'd known this day might come. A gunshot rang out above. Rose bit her lip hard enough to taste blood but stayed hidden. More shots shouting, the sound of men running. Then silence. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, the cellar door opened. Ethan's voice. "They're gone, but they'll be back with more men." Rose climbed up into the ransacked kitchen. Ethan was bleeding from a graze on his arm but alive. "We can't stay here," he said. "Webb's got half the county on his payroll. Local sheriff, territorial marshal. They'll all believe his word over ours. Then we leave." Rose's voice was steady now, purpose clarifying everything. "But first, we finish what my father started." That night they rode through snow-covered mountains toward the territorial capital. In Rose's medical bag were copies of every document, every piece of evidence against Harrison Webb. And in her memory was 8 years of suppressed fury finally finding its target. Webb had killed her father, destroyed her life, hunted her across 2 states. Now it was her turn to hunt. Helena, the territorial capital, bustled with pre-Christmas activity despite the December cold. Rose and Ethan arrived after 2 days of hard riding their horses, steaming in the frosty air. The territorial courthouse stood imposing against gray sky symbol of law that had failed her family once. But this time Rose carried more than grief and accusations. She carried proof. "The commission meets tomorrow," Ethan said as they stabled their horses. "But Webb has friends here. We need allies." Rose nodded toward the Chinese quarter visible across town. "I know where to start." They found the community leader, an elderly man named Mr. Liu, in a small herb shop that smelled of ginger and dried roots. His eyes widened when Rose introduced herself. "Dr. Dalton's daughter. Your father saved my grandson from typhoid fever in Denver. We heard you died in the clinic fire." "Nearly did, but I survived and I've been practicing medicine in secret." Rose showed him the evidence. "Harrison Webb killed my father to cover up industrial poisoning. He's still doing it, still targeting immigrant communities who can't fight back." Mr. Liu studied the documents with growing anger. "In Montana, his lumber mill uses Chinese workers. Dangerous conditions, contaminated water. 3 men died last month. He said it was their own carelessness." "It wasn't carelessness. It was murder for profit." Rose leaned forward. "Will you help me testify?" "The commission doesn't listen to Chinese voices. They'll listen to mine, and I'll make sure they hear yours too." That evening, word spread through the immigrant communities. Chinese workers, Irish railroad men, German farmers all came forward with stories of Webb's businesses, of corners cut, and safety ignored of workers who'd complained and then mysteriously disappeared. Rose worked through the night organizing testimony and evidence with the methodical precision her father had taught her. This was medicine too, cutting away disease to save the body whole. Ethan found her before dawn, bent over documents by lamplight. "You should rest." "Can't. Too much to do." She looked up at him, seeing past the guilt and regret to the man who had thrown away his career to seek justice for a stranger. "Ethan, why didn't you tell me you'd resigned as sheriff?" He sat beside her, tired lines etched deep around his eyes. "Because I was ashamed. I should have fought harder, should have found another way. When they ordered me to drop the case, I chose the easy path and quit. Let them think I was just another burned-out lawman. But you kept investigating." For 8 years, following leads, gathering evidence, waiting for a chance to bring Webb down. He touched the documents. Your father deserved justice. You deserved answers. Even if I never found you, even if it destroyed my life trying. Rose felt something shift inside her chest, a wall cracking that she'd built around her heart years ago. You gave up everything. I gave up a lie. The badge didn't make me a good man. This, he gestured to the evidence. This is what good men do. She reached for his hand, calloused from ranch work and marked with old scars. I was wrong to blame you. You did more for my father than anyone else ever did. I should have done more, should have moved faster. You did what you could with what you had, and you never stopped caring about the truth. She squeezed his fingers. That matters more than you know. The courthouse was packed when the Territorial Health Commission convened at noon. Harrison Webb sat in the front row with his lawyer's confident smile in place. He'd pulled strings called in favors, prepared to crush another inconvenient investigation. He hadn't counted on Rose Dalton walking into that courtroom alive and armed with 8 years of evidence. The commission recognizes Dr. Rose Dalton, the chief commissioner announced. Webb's face went dead white. Several people gasped. The notorious witch of Elkridge was not only alive but claiming her father's professional title. Rose stepped forward, medical bag in hand. Commissioners, I appear before you as the daughter of Dr. Jonathan Dalton, murdered in Denver in 1878, and as a practicing physician trained in his methods. I bring evidence of systematic industrial poisoning carried out by Harrison Webb across 2 territories. Objection, Webb's lawyer shot up. Miss Dalton is not licensed to practice medicine. Her testimony is inadmissible. I was trained by one of the finest doctors in the West, Rose replied calmly. I've treated patients for 8 years using methods that would shame most licensed physicians, and I can read autopsy reports better than any man in this room. She opened her bag and pulled out a preserved tissue sample. This is lung tissue from a Chinese worker at Webb's lumber mill. Note the black deposits, the scarring pattern. Classic pneumoconiosis from breathing contaminated sawdust. Webb was on his feet. This is outrageous. She's a disturbed woman with a grudge. Sit down, Mr. Webb, the chief commissioner ordered. Continue, Dr. Dalton. Rose presented her case with methodical precision. Medical evidence of poisoning. Financial records showing Webb's pattern of buying mines and mills with safety violations. Witness testimony from workers across both territories. And finally, the letter her father had hidden in the clinic walls, his final documentation of Webb's crimes, written hours before his death. My father was going to testify before this commission 8 years ago, Rose concluded. Harrison Webb murdered him to prevent that testimony, and now Webb has followed me to Montana attempting to silence the last witness to his crimes. Lies, Webb snarled. Pure fabrication from a delusional woman. Then explain this. Ethan Cross stepped forward, his badge glinting on his coat. Rose's heart stopped. He was wearing his sheriff's star again. I'm Sheriff Cross of Helena County, he announced. Yesterday, I formally reopened the Jonathan Dalton murder case based on new evidence. Mr. Webb, you're under arrest for murder in the first degree. Chaos erupted. Webb's lawyer shouted objections. His hired men reached for weapons but found themselves facing armed deputies who'd quietly surrounded the courtroom. Rose stared at Ethan in shock. How come? Governor owed me a favor, he said quietly, and Helena County needed a sheriff who couldn't be bought. Seems like a good fit. Webb lunged toward Rose, murder in his eyes, but Ethan was faster. The 2 men crashed into the witness table, scattering documents. Webb pulled a hidden knife, slashed wildly. Rose didn't think. She grabbed her medical bag and swung it hard into Webb's wrist, the heavy glass bottles inside, making him drop the blade with a howl of pain. Ethan pinned him quickly, breathing hard. Harrison Webb, you're under arrest for the murders of Jonathan Dalton and 15 mine workers, conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted murder. As they dragged Webb away in chains, he twisted back toward Rose. You think this ends it? I have friends' influence. I'll be out in a month and I'll finish what I started. Rose met his gaze steadily. No, you won't, because I'm not hiding anymore, and I'm not afraid of you. The commission voted unanimously to accept her evidence and recommend criminal charges. Webb's business empire crumbled within days as investigations spread across both territories. But for Rose, the real victory came later that evening as she and Ethan walked through Helena's snowy streets toward the hotel. "So," she said, "Sheriff Cross has a nice ring to it. Deputy Sheriff Dalton would sound better." Rose stopped walking. "What?" Ethan turned to face her hat in his hands. "The governor needs someone to head the new Territorial Health Inspection Division. Someone with medical training who can't be intimidated or bought." He paused. "Someone who's already proven she can stand up to men like Webb." "Are you offering me a job, Sheriff Cross?" "I'm offering you a partnership. Professional and—" He cleared his throat. "Personal, if you'll have me." Rose studied his face in the lamplight. This man who'd sacrifice everything for justice, who'd never stopped fighting for her father's memory, who'd chosen truth over safety at every turn. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them." "I keep practicing medicine. Real medicine, not just inspections. There are people in these territories who need healing, and I won't abandon them again." "Agreed. And we do this as equals. No pretty wife in a pretty dress. Partners in everything." "Wouldn't want it any other way." Ethan's smile was soft, real. "Anything else?" Rose reached up and touched the scar on her face, then let her hand fall to rest over his heart. "When you look at me, what do you see?" "I see the bravest woman I've ever known. I see a healer who never stopped caring about the truth. I see someone who survived fire and came out stronger." He covered her hand with his. "I see home." She rose on her toes and kissed him, then gentle and sure, in the middle of Helena's main street with snow falling around them like benediction. "Is that a yes?" he whispered against her lips. "That's a yes to all of it." 6 months later, Rose stood in the doorway of their clinic in Helena watching Ethan examine a young Chinese boy's broken arm. The child was chattering in mixed English and Cantonese, and Ethan was doing his best to understand while setting the bone with surprising gentleness. "Dr. Dalton," the boy's mother bowed respectfully. "Thank you for teaching Sheriff Cross. He has good hands now." Rose smiled. He always had good hands. He just needed to learn how to heal instead of just protect. Their practice had grown quickly. Word spread through the immigrant communities that here was a place where language didn't matter, where payment could be made in vegetables, or labor where Chinese children and Irish workers received the same care as territorial officials. Rose treated the medical cases. Ethan investigated industrial accidents and safety violations. Together, they were building something her father would have been proud of, justice backed by healing law enforcement that actually served the people who needed it most. That evening, they sat on their porch, watching the sun set over Helena's bustling streets. The Territorial Health Commission had officially licensed Rose to practice medicine, the first woman doctor in Montana Territory. Webb was serving 25 years in territorial prison, his business empire dismantled and sold to pay reparations to his victims' families. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked, reaching for her hand. Rose considered the question. "About Webb, about the fight, about us. About any of it." She looked at their intertwined fingers, her scarred hand, his gun-calloused one, both marked by hard choices and harder work. "No regrets. This life isn't pretty or easy, but it's real. It's ours. Even the scars, especially the scars." She smiled. "They remind us what we've survived, what we're strong enough to overcome." Ethan raised their joined hands to his lips, kissed her wedding ring, simple gold, practical, unadorned. "I love you, Dr. Cross." "I love you too, Sheriff Cross." In the distance, a train whistle echoed through the valley, bringing new people to Montana Territory. Some would be seeking fresh starts. Some would be running from mistakes. And all would find a place where healing was possible, where justice wasn't just for the wealthy, where two scarred people had proven that broken things could be made stronger in the mending. Rose leaned against Ethan's shoulder and watched stars appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new patience, new challenges, new opportunities to build something better from the ashes of what had been broken. Tonight, though, she was content to sit with the man she'd learned to trust again in the town they were helping to heal under the endless Montana sky that had witnessed their journey from suspicion to love, from hiding to truth, from separate wounds to shared wholeness. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, their future, was as wide and welcoming as the western horizon, full of promise and possibility for anyone brave enough to build it one honest choice at a time. And Rose Dalton Cross, daughter of a murdered doctor and wife of a justice-seeking sheriff, had never been afraid of honest work. Thank you for joining Rose and Ethan's journey from guilt and hiding to truth and healing. Their love story reminds us that sometimes the people who hurt us most are ourselves, and the greatest courage is choosing honesty over safety. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of love and redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever found love in the most unexpected place? Until next time, remember that every ending is really just a new beginning.